Christian parenting. Aloha, friends, and welcome back to the Monica Swanson podcast. I'm so happy to get to hang out with you today, and this is a special episode. I'm feeling a little sentimental even as I get started. I'm calling this one a story, an announcement, and an invitation. And it's actually, this is kind of going to be my story of how I ended up doing what I do today. I'm going from being a 40-year-old full-time homeschooling mom to writing books, having a podcast, all the things. I actually get quite a few questions and realized I've never publicly shared this story. Not going to tell you all the details because it's a long and winding road, but share some of the highlights, pivotal moments, and also some of the lessons and hopefully some encouragement for all of you. Those of you who are interested in writing a book or podcasting and anything else, I just think that the things the Lord has taught me through this process hopefully will encourage you no matter what. So if you don't want to hear the story, you're welcome to fast forward. There is an announcement coming later in the episode, but I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as I can. But there's some pivotal moments I'm excited to share as I reflect back. So I'll probably get some of the dates off. I'm just remembering the best I can, and I'll probably be glad one day when I'm a old lady listening back and remembering the story, because God's been so good to me. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing in this journey. And let's just kick off. I'm going to start at 2010. That's the year that my son Levi was born. Many of you know I had 3 sons pretty close together. And then it was just over 6.5 years later, just before I turned 40, Levi was born. And a few side details. We were living in central Oahu then, a town called Mililani. And we had been there 9 years. And we found that every day we were going up to the North Shore. The boys were starting to surf. We were involved in a church on the North Shore, doing a homeschool co-op. So at some point, it just made sense that we would look into moving to the North Shore. So we put our home on the market, and my parents were gracious to let us move out of our home. It's a lot easier to show a house without 4 little boys running around. So we moved into their little 900 square foot beach condo that year. And it was a crazy time. I mean, 2 bedrooms, 1 room had 2 sets of bunk beds. I was homeschooling, had a newborn, pretty wild. That was one of those seasons where you lose your mind like every day, but you also know that you're going to look back and cherish those memories. And we do. Dave and I often recall those special days living in the beach condo. We thought it would be for a short time. It ended up being almost a year. And that's its own story. But during that year, that was when I turned 40, and I just started to crave a creative outlet. I've always wanted to focus first and foremost on being a mom and a wife, but I do love to do a lot. Like I can juggle a lot. That's just my personality. And I started to think about some options for things I might do. And at that point, I had just discovered blogs. They had been around for a while, but it took me some time. But once I discovered them, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I think I followed the pioneer woman, and I thought, wow, you can share stories and pictures. It seemed so short and sweet, and yet unfortunately, I had no background in technology at all. I didn't even know how to download a photo. My husband did all of that up to that point. So it was going to be a steep learning curve. And on January 1st, 2011, my brother-in-law, Jonathan, helped me set up a little WordPress blog. And some of you go back with me that far, and I will love to hear from you if you leave comments. But back then I called it thegrommom.com. Remember that, a few of you? Well, I didn't know back then that many people would end up reading that blog, and that a lot of people don't know what a grom is. So if that is you, brief history, a grom in Hawaii, or I suppose in other beach towns, I think it originated in Australia. Sometimes snowboarders use the term, but it's a kid who does board sports. And of course, my boys were surfers and skaters, and so I was the grommom.com, and eventually learned that a lot of people were confused and didn't know what that meant. So I ended up changing it a couple of years later to monicaswanson.com, of course. But started off with the Grom Mom, and I quickly fell in love with blogging. I was hooked. It was so much fun for me to get to just sit down and share some stories, some pictures. I was learning in the margin of life when baby was napping, kids were sleeping, my husband was at work. I was like, what is Twitter? Instagram was new then. Facebook. I was studying other people's writing and just really found my true love in blogging. I still love blogging, by the way. And I also got super consistent right away, even though I had almost no readers. Maybe my mom was reading my blog post, but I started blogging, I'd say 3, but probably 5 times a week consistently. And I've said before that consistency is kind of my superpower. I'm not great at a lot of things, but I am consistent. When it comes to exercise, people say, what's one thing you do? I'm like, I've been consistent. I don't do anything extreme. I'm just consistent. And I think there is something to that. And that's going to be a theme that comes up in this message today, I believe. But I spent a couple years just cranking out blog posts. And at first they were pretty light. And again, mostly just photos and stories. But over time, I got a little more courage to share my heart. God had taught me so much. And many of you know, if you've read my books or followed me for long, those early years of parenting were really hard for me. I was stretched. And it took me digging in and really seeking God, finding great mentors and resources. And I really grew a lot as a woman, as a wife, and a mom during those years. And so I started to share a little bit more, some of the wisdom I had learned. And we were homeschooling then, and I saw the fruit of my labors. And so I was just sharing a lot of those things. And it was then that I guess I got connected with a few people online. Last week, you heard from Brooke McLaughlin, who used to have the Mob Society, Mother of Boys. It was a community of writers, and they invited me to be on their writing team. So I was just growing a lot in those years. And then I hit a pivotal moment. And I like to share this because it just was so special and such a big piece of my story. And that was that during those times, again, I was writing a lot, but there was a little bit of tension because it was taking some time. I mean, I still tried to be a mom and a wife first, but I would stay up late and I'd be on the computer and my husband would get home from work and I'd like close the laptop and it just felt a little bit uncomfortable. Like this was my thing, but maybe he wasn't totally on board. And then we had this night, a date night. I'll never forget, we were out at sushi and across the table, Dave challenged me and he said, so this blogging thing, is this a hobby or a job? And fair enough. That was a good question. And I think that oftentimes in the world we live in today, us women have so many opportunities, right? To chase these exciting things, these side hustles, which sometimes can be such a blessing for our families, a great outlet, but they can also be a real distraction. And I think that there is, a fine line there. And we need to be prayerful and wise about these things that we pursue. So it was a fair question, but it kind of made me mad. I got a little defensive, but I'll never forget what I said across the table back. I could probably quote it. What I said was, I really can't explain this, but whether I have 10 people reading my writing or 10,000, I just feel like I'm doing what God created me to do, and I want to keep doing it. And that's when Dave said, all right, then, I'm on board. How can I support you? And that was such a beautiful moment. It makes me tear up because it's like I needed his support. I needed to know we were in this together. And I hadn't felt that way up until then. And I know God creates us, man and woman to be one flesh. And just having him come on board with me, it was like something really beautiful happened in that moment. And I believe it did because I know that was a Thursday night because Friday night, Dave went to work, to the hospital to do a night shift. The boys were all watching a movie. And I opened my laptop to write a blog post. Now, a little bit of background on that too, because many of you are familiar with this blog post. That previous week, Josiah had a birthday and turned 15, and Jonah had turned 13. Their birthdays are 6 days apart. And leading up to that time, I remember that everything I saw online, especially about the teenage years, was just bad news. Everyone was like, enjoy your kids when they're little because you're going to lose it all when they're teenagers. They're going to rebel. They're going to quit talking to you, and just a lot of really bad news. But that hadn't been our experience at all. Now, it wasn't easy. There were challenges, trust me. But I loved the teenage years, and I wanted to share a message of hope and encouragement and just some practical help. So that's when I wrote the blog post, What a Teenage Boy Needs Most from His Mom. And that just kind of came out real naturally. It was just 11 items. I've said before, it was not rocket science. I didn't create anything new. It was just really practical, but I think it was filled with hope and encouragement. And I sent it to Dave at the hospital. I'm like, all right, if he's on board, I'll send it to him. And he read it and he's like, this is great, publish it. And then I remember the next morning I woke up and like 5,000 people had read it. I was like, wow, that's the most I've ever had. And I couldn't help but reflect and be like, wow, Dave's on board. Look at this. This is such a blessing. Thinking that was it. But every day, more and more readers were coming and more visitors. And I don't know who was sharing it. I know the Mob Society shared it. But by about the 2-week mark, over 2 million people had read that blog post. And my computer kept crashing. It was just a wild time. In fact, that was when I had hired Gretchen Louise, who still is wonderful. She helps me with all things technology. She was redoing my blog, going from the Grandmom to monicaswanson.com. And the computer kept crashing. So we still laugh when we look back at that time. But I was hearing from so many people, getting so many emails, and I was like, oh, clearly I've touched on a need. Like people need hope, people need encouragement, teenage years, raising boys. And so that continued, and I continued to write and blog, and I had more blog posts go viral. And that was just the beginning of a really busy and really exciting season. So a couple years go by, I am still consistent. I'm still blogging. Now I was, networking with more people, having some ads on my blog. So it was a little bit of a job, but hardly. And maybe this is a good time to pause and say, for those people who reach out to me and say, hey, I want to write a book. How do I get published? Maybe there's times where you do just write a book and get published, or if you're an excellent writer or you have a connection. But for me, getting published looked like 8 years of writing my heart out every day, most days of the week. It looked like, the wee hours of the night or nap time. Of course, if my kids went to school or if I was able to put more time into it, maybe it would have happened faster. But for me, it was being faithful to what God put in front of me. And I wasn't strategic, trying to just get a book deal. I think I probably was starting to dream about a book, but I just really wanted to be faithful, to serve the people in front of me, to encourage, to share my heart. And that makes me think of a verse in Luke 16:10 that says, one who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much. Now, I didn't think of that at the time, but when I reflect back, I'm like, that was my heart, was to truly just be faithful. So I just want to encourage you, anyone out there who is interested in writing, or maybe it's something else, art, or pursuing anything. I just encourage you to be faithful with what's in front of you. And maybe in the season you're in, it may not be the time to go full force. Your family needs you. In fact, if you have young kids, I really encourage you to give your all to your family first and foremost. But you might begin to nurture that. You might just start journaling or a blog or Substack or painting, whatever your thing is. I encourage you to nurture that, but also to not let it distract you from the more important things. Because no doubt in that season, God was doing a work in me that he had to do for me to have the ministry I have now. And I think back and I'm thankful that I didn't start any of this when my boys were younger, because no doubt it's been a distraction. Levi hasn't gotten as much of me as the older boys did. And I feel bad about that. And so I'm grateful that I was 40 years old when I started, and I've still had plenty of years, and I still have many years ahead, and I'm somewhat holding back still until Levi is graduated, and then I'll probably be even more committed to the work that I have to do. But I just want to encourage you, it's hard to see in the moment, but those kids really do grow up fast. So give your family what you can. I know many of you work regular jobs as well, but I encourage you to make the most important things the most important things. So with this, a couple years later, I was introduced to a literary agent, and that is another piece of the story. If you are wanting to get published, it's really important to have an agent. Most publishers won't look at your proposal unless you have an agent, so that takes some time, but I had an agent. The way it works is they help you create a book proposal, which is huge. You have to have outlines and all these pieces to the proposal. You have to have a couple chapters of the book. You have to share kind of a marketing strategy. There is so much to a book proposal. And then they act almost like a real estate agent, where they then pitch it to all the publishers, sometimes 20, 30 publishers. And then those publishers who are interested ask you for an interview. And that's the process that it takes to get a book deal. And I did all that. 2017, signed a book contract for Boy Mom, What Your Son Needs Most from You. And it came out. That's the next step, is it takes a long time. Once you've signed that contract, you have to write the book, and you have to have an editor go back and forth with you on it. There's many, many steps, but 2019, August, Boy Mom was released. So that's the book story. The summer before it was released is when I decided to start a podcast. I thought it would be a good way to support the book release, started the Boy Mom podcast. And I was so nervous. I took a course on how to podcast because I had no idea what I was doing. I've always felt like a writer who podcasts, not a podcaster who writes. So I put myself out there. But I really did enjoy it. I had so much fun sharing on topics related to raising boys. And then over time, of course, getting to meet so many people, doing interviews. It has been such a blessing. Started off, of course, as the Boy Mom podcast. And then a couple years later, had the opportunity to write my book, Raising Amazing. And that's when I changed the podcast to the Monica Swanson podcast. So there's that backstory. But first, I'll share this other kind of pivotal moment. After Boy Mom, we hit 2020, right? So the whole world kind of gets weird. I'm sure you look back and have your own stories. But I followed up Boy Mom with another book idea, and I pitched that to the publisher, and they turned me down. They weren't interested. And that was heartbreaking. I was like, oh my goodness, have I failed? Maybe I'll never get to write another book. But I see God's hand in that, because that summer 2020, all my boys were home, and my boys are great with technology. And I had been really interested for years in creating a course. I always loved the idea of course creation because rather than just text like you have in a book, you can also have, interviews and downloads and things you print out, and it can be pretty. And I really, really wanted to create a course. And I specifically wanted to create a course because by then I had so many people reaching out to me who had read Boy Mom, and especially the chapter on character. And they were saying, I love that thing you shared about in Boy Mom, that character training you did with your son. I want to do that with my son or daughter. Can you tell me more about that? And I was like, oh man, I can't answer that in an email. I don't even think it fits in a book chapter. I want to create a course all about character because that is such a piece of my heart, such a big part of our family story. And so with all my boys home and without a book to work on, I had the opportunity to put together the character training course. And that's been such a big part of my journey. I've loved that course. Of course, over time, I've updated it and added to it. And so I just am so thankful that I had the opportunity to learn how to do that and share that. And then, yes, a couple years later, publishers were interested, and I had the chance to write Raising Amazing, which touches on, yes, character, but also faith and family relationships. My husband was a part of that. My boys each contributed to chapters. So that was super special as well. And then right on the heels of Raising Amazing was Becoming Homeschoolers. And you guys know, each book, it's like children. They're all special to me in different ways. But as I've shared recently, Becoming Homeschoolers has been so special because homeschooling has just been one of the greatest joys of my motherhood journey. So it's been so much fun, but it has been full. And in the middle of all that, I have been podcasting week after week. And like I said, consistency may be my superpower, but my goodness, it's been 6 years, 52 weeks a year. I have not missed a podcast episode, and that's a lot. And though I started off mostly sharing my heart for raising boys and parenting, over time what happens as a podcaster is you start to hear from a lot of publicists who represent other people's books, and they want their people to come on and talk about their books. And I get that. When I write a book, I want to be on everyone's podcast. It's such a great way to get your message out. But what can happen is you can kind of lose the purpose that you started with, if you know what I'm saying. Now, there are podcasters out there who are just interviewers, and they are amazing. They love it. That's what they do. But that wasn't necessarily what I felt called to do. I wanted to share my heart like I do in blogs or in books. And when you're busy reading everyone else's books and studying and preparing and then editing, and thankfully I've had Christian Parenting come alongside as my host, and they have published my podcast for me for 5 years, which has been wonderful. And they're so helpful. But it's just been a super busy season, week after week, working on the podcast. And I haven't really had the opportunity to do some of the things that I initially set out to do. So all of that leads me to the announcement part of this episode, which maybe you're not going to be surprised now to hear. It's a lot. I won't say I've ever said I'm burnt out, but I've sensed that could be coming. I felt like I've been pushing and pushing for so long, almost 14 and a half years since the blog started, and 6 full years since I started podcasting. And I started to sense this might be a really good time to step back and take a break. In fact, I was like, oh, in the Bible, that 7th year is the sabbatical year, Sabbath rest. I was like, maybe this is my time to take a Sabbath rest from podcasting. Fully intending to come back, Lord willing, I want to come back, but I have decided that this June is going to be the beginning of a break from podcasting. And there's a few other reasons why that I'll go ahead and share here as well. Many of you know, if you get my emails, especially, that my dad has been battling cancer. Normally, my parents spend the winters here in Hawaii, and then they go back to Gig Harbor, Washington in the spring. But Dad was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer last winter, and he chose to do his treatments here, which has been such a gift. I've been so grateful to walk through chemo and radiation and just be here with my parents. My husband being a hospital doctor, it's been really helpful. He's really connected my dad with great doctors, and Dad is so grateful for the care he's had here. As I record, I'm not sure what the summer is going to look like, if they're going to have the chance to go back to Washington or if they'll be here, but I really want to be available for them during this season. Also, as this airs, I will be 2 days away from taking off for Australia, where I get to go support Luke in his first Challenger Series surf contest. So excited about that. And then I come back and there's inter-island golf tournaments with Levi in July, golf tournaments on the mainland, and then Luke has the U.S. Open surf contest in Huntington Beach in July. That's going to be super exciting. So lots of travel, Dad's treatments, and just wanting to pull back a little bit and really remind myself or be available to do what I really have felt called to do and to have that space to create and write. I've got a book idea I can't wait to dive into. I just haven't had that space to start working on it. And then I'll say this, when I do come back, again, Lord willing, I plan to come back to the podcast. I have a new format. I'm so excited. I'm so excited I could start it tomorrow, but I'm going to make myself wait and pray and really have a good plan. But I want to do things a little bit different and have a unique way that I'm going to podcast. And I think you're going to love it. So I'm really, really excited whenever it is that I come back. So there's the announcement. And then finally, the invitation. Super simple. I really want to invite you. If you're not on my email list yet, I want to invite you to join the email list because though I won't be podcasting, I will be emailing every Wednesday of the summer. They're going to be short and sweet. I have a fun format for the email this summer that I can't wait. They're going to be packed with just some links to great resources and some encouragement. And that's also where you'll hear if I'm going to come back to the podcast, any news or updates. Email is where you're going to find all that. And if you're not on the list yet, you can join at monicaswanson.com/subscribe. Can't wait to serve you well there. I'll never share your email address. You can trust me, but I'm really excited to connect with you there each week. Now, just so you know, character training course will open again near the end of June. Super excited. We have been revamping things, working on design. You're going to love it. If you're already in the course, I'll let you know when it's all redone, but there's a lot of new stuff in there. Can't wait to share all that. And again, email is where you're going to hear about it when the doors are going to open. So I don't want you to miss that. So anyway, friends, that just is a wrap on the news, the story, the announcement, and the invitation. And again, I just want to encourage you, whatever season you're in, my heart is to just encourage you in your motherhood, in your marriage, in your family, and in your faith. That's my greatest privilege, is to be able to encourage you in all that. I've been revisiting Titus chapter 2 recently and just remembering that, now I get to call myself an older woman, and it is my calling by the Lord to encourage you to love your husbands and your children, to be busy at home, to be kind, to live pure lives. And there's nothing I would rather do than to know that in some small way, God is using me to encourage you. And it just humbles me to think that I've had the opportunity to do what I do. It's kind of funny. I mean, I never would have dreamt this would be my life today, and I'm so grateful. It's been a lot. It's been a lot of work, but I'm so grateful, and I'm grateful to every one of you who tunes in. Those of you who write me kind messages and encourage me, thank you so much. Those of you who pray for me, thank you. I need it. And all the ratings and reviews on the podcast, on the books, every one of those really, really blesses me. So just know that the things you do to support me do not go unseen. So I want to thank you. I want to encourage you. I won't be a stranger. I'm still going to be around. And remember, there's 6 years of podcast episodes. So if you've missed any, 6 years is a long time. You can go back and start from the beginning if you need something to listen to. Also, I'll tell you, Christian Parenting has a whole network of podcasts. There's some really good ones on specific topics that might minister to you. So go over to christianparenting.org. Check out all the different podcasts. Also, my blog, 14 and a half years of blog posts. And you can use that little search bar to find topics that you might be interested in. So go over to monicaswanson.com and find some recipes, find some blog posts. Hopefully that will keep you busy if you need something to do online this summer. But it's summer, so I want you to be with your families and be all in, hopefully having some fun and enjoying time with your family this summer. So I just want to thank you again and again. And I want to thank the Lord, my family, and everyone who has supported me in this journey. And this is not goodbye. I hope to be back. So stay tuned over in my emails as to when that will be. But thanks, guys. I hope you have a wonderful summer ahead. And until next time, aloha.